I retired on a Thursday. 32 years. 32 years of 12-hour shifts, fluorescent lights, compression socks, and the particular smell of a hospital that gets into your hair and your clothes and eventually your dreams. 32 years of holding other people's hands at the worst moments of their lives. And on that Thursday, my colleagues threw me a party in the break room. Cake from the grocery store, paper plates, a card signed by everyone on the floor. My supervisor Linda gave a little speech. People hugged me. Someone cried. I think it was me. And then I walked out through those sliding doors for the last time. And I sat in my car, and I thought, now who takes care of me? My name is Margaret Ellen Callahan, Maggie. Only my mother called me Margaret, and she did it exclusively when I was in trouble, which was often enough that I still flinch a little when I hear the full name. I am 60 years old.
Born in Cincinnati, Ohio, 1964. The year the Civil Rights Act was signed, which my father said meant I came into the world when things were finally starting to change. Daddy was an optimist. He believed in the essential goodness of people right up until the end, and I have been trying to hold on to that quality my whole life with mixed results. I am the daughter of Patrick and Ruth Callahan, Irish Catholic, both sides going back further than anyone bothered to document. Daddy was a firefighter, Mama was a bookkeeper and the actual manager of everything, including Daddy, which he acknowledged freely and gratefully. I am the middle of 5 children, 2 older brothers, Sean and Patrick Jr., who we call PJ, and 2 younger sisters, Kathleen and Anne. We are loud at Christmas and devoted to each other in the quiet, practical way of people who grew up in a small house with 1 bathroom and learned early that you either get along or you suffer. I am a mother, 1 daughter. Grace, 31, lives in Portland. Does something with sustainable design that I am very proud of and only partially understand. Grace is the person I am most grateful I brought into the world, and also the person who tells me the truth most directly, which is sometimes the same thing and sometimes not. I am a widow, 7 years. My husband Tom died of a heart attack at 56, which the doctor said was sudden and which I, as a nurse who had watched his diet and his stress levels and his stubbornness about checkups for 20 years, knew was not sudden at all. Tom was a contractor, broad shoulders, big laugh, the kind of man who fixed things without being asked. I have not yet figured out how to live in a world where he is not in the next room, and I am a retired nurse. 32 years at St. Catherine's Medical Center in Atlanta. Started as a floor nurse, became charge nurse, spent my last 15 years in the ICU. I have held the hands of people taking their last breath more times than I can count. I have called families at 3 a.m. with news that changed their lives. I have worked through pandemics and budget cuts and understaffing and the particular exhaustion of a system that asks its nurses to give everything and then asks for more. I gave it willingly. I want to say that. I loved nursing. I love it still in the way you love something that cost you a great deal, honestly, completely, with full knowledge of the price. That's who I am on paper. What I am learning at 60 is who I am underneath. Nurses are caretakers before they are nurses. I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean it as an observation about how we are built and what draws us to the work. You don't accidentally become a nurse. You become a nurse because something in you has always oriented toward the person in the room who is struggling. Something in you tracks pain the way other people track weather. You walk into a space and you assess Who needs something here? Who is not okay? My mother was that way. Her mother was that way. I watched it modeled so thoroughly that I didn't know it was a choice until it was already a character trait. I became a nurse because I wanted to help people. I stayed a nurse because I didn't know who I was without it. Those are two different things, and it took me 32 years and a Thursday afternoon in a parking lot to understand the difference. Tom dying changed everything, and I let it change nothing. That sounds like a contradiction. It isn't. When he died, I was 53 years old. Grace was 24 and had just moved to Portland. I was suddenly alone in a house that had been built for two people, and I had two choices. I could sit with that loss and let it remake me, or I could work. I worked. I picked up extra shifts. I chaired the nursing committee. I mentored young nurses. I brought casseroles to other people's grief. I was so busy being useful that I didn't have to be present in my own life. My sister Kathleen called me 8 months after Tom died and said, "Maggie, when do you cry?" I said, "I cry." She said, "When?" I thought about it. "In the car," I said. "Sometimes in the car." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's not enough, Maggie. That's not enough space for what you're carrying." I told her I was fine. I was not fine. I was what I had always been, functional. Highly impressively, exhaustingly functional. Fine and functional are not the same thing. I was a nurse. I knew that. I had seen patients declare themselves fine from behind eyes full of pain more times than I could count. I just didn't apply that knowledge to myself. Let me tell you what nursing teaches you about the human body. It teaches you that the body keeps score, that what the mind refuses to process, the body holds. I watched it in patients for 32 years. The grief that showed up as chronic pain, the anxiety that became an autoimmune condition, the loneliness that aged a person faster than time. I knew this. I taught this to student nurses. And then I went home and ignored every signal my own body was sending. The fatigue that went deeper than tired. The headaches that arrived every Sunday evening like a standing appointment. The way I stopped tasting food somewhere around year 28. The dreams. I will not describe the dreams in detail, but I will say that when you spend your career in an ICU, the dreams are vivid and they do not stay in the hospital. My body was talking. I was very skilled at not listening. Grace came home for Christmas 2 years before I retired. She arrived on a Tuesday, dropped her bag in the hallway, walked into the kitchen where I was doing 3 things at once. I am always doing 3 things at once. And she just stood there looking at me. I said, "What?" She said, "Mum, stop for a second." I stopped. She looked at my face for a long moment, the way I used to look at patients when I was assessing them, looking past the surface. Then she said, "You're exhausted, not tired, exhausted, in your bones." I said, "I'm fine, Gracie." She said, "You've been saying that for 7 years and I've been letting you say it and I'm done letting you say it. When did someone last take care of you?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out because I could not remember. I could not remember the last time I had been cared for. The last time someone had looked at me the way I looked at patients. With full attention, without agenda, just asking what do you need and meaning it. Tom used to do that. Tom would come home from a long day and he'd look at me and he'd say, "How are you, Mags? Really?" And he meant really. He wanted the true answer, not the functional one. Nobody had asked me that since he died. And more honestly, I had stopped asking it of myself. I started therapy 6 months before I retired. Grace suggested it. Kathleen seconded it. My friend Donna, 30 years. She was a nurse too. We met on our first shift and have been honest with each other ever since. Donna said, "Maggie, you've been referred to therapy 3 times in the last year by people who love you. That's a pattern." I said, "I know how to process things." She said, "Knowing how to process things and actually processing them are not the same thing." Donna has a gift for that, for saying the precise true thing with no decoration. My therapist is Dr. James Osei, 55, quiet, Ghanaian American, with a calm that feels earned rather than performed. He has a plant in the corner of his office that is extremely healthy and well cared for, and I noticed that immediately because of course I did. First session, he asked me to tell him about myself. I gave him my resume. He listened politely. Then he said, "That's what you've done. Who are you?" I said, "I'm not sure I know the difference." He said, "That's where we'll start. Here is what nobody tells you about being a caretaker your whole life. You become so good at reading other people's needs that you lose the ability to read your own. You sit in a room and you know who is uncomfortable, who is frightened, who needs reassurance, who needs space. You can read a person's body language from across a hallway. You have finely tuned sensors for other people's pain. And you have almost no sensors for your own, because your own pain learned early that it would not be attended to. Your own pain learned to wait, and pain that waits long enough goes quiet. And quiet pain is the most dangerous kind because you stop tracking it. Dr. Osei gave me an exercise in our 3rd session. He said, "Every morning this week, I want you to sit quietly for 10 minutes and ask yourself 3 questions. What do I feel right now? What do I need right now? What do I want right now?" I said, "That's it?" He said, "Try it first, then tell me that's it." I went home and I set my alarm for 10 minutes and I sat in Tom's chair. I still think of it as Tom's chair. And I ask myself the first question, what do I feel right now? I sat there for the full 10 minutes and I could not answer, not because I felt nothing, but because I had spent so many years translating my feelings into action, feeling worried and making a plan, feeling sad and finding someone to help, feeling scared and staying busy. That I had lost the ability to just feel something and let it be a feeling. I went back to Dr. Osei the following week and I said, "I don't know how to feel things without immediately trying to fix them." He said, "I know, that's the work." Tom. I need to talk about Tom because you cannot understand who I am without understanding who we were. We met when I was 24 and he was 26. I was a 2nd-year nurse. He was doing renovation work on a house 2 doors down from my apartment. I came home one evening and he was on the front steps of that house drinking a bottle of water and he said, "Long day?" I said, "You have no idea." He said, "Tell me." And I did. Standing on the sidewalk with my nursing shoes still on, I told this stranger about my day, about the patient we lost, about the family in the waiting room, about the particular weight of that kind of work. And he listened, really listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, just listening. I knew on the sidewalk, 28 years of marriage, 2 people who genuinely liked each other, which I have come to understand is rarer than love and more sustaining. He made me laugh every day, not performed laughter, real laughter, the kind that comes from being known. When he died, I lost my person. I don't say that lightly. I say it as a medical professional who understands what the research says about losing a spouse, and as a woman who felt the specific weight of moving through the world without the one person who always wanted the true answer to "how are you?" Grief is not linear. Nurses know that. I knew that. And still I was surprised by the ways it found me. In the grocery store, in the car, in the particular quality of Sunday morning light that he always said was his favorite. I carried it the only way I knew how. I kept moving. The first month after I retired, I was lost. Completely, disorienting lost. I woke up every morning at 5 a.m. The body does not unlearn 32 years quickly, and I had nowhere to be. Nothing that needed me. No one waiting. I cleaned the house twice. I reorganized the kitchen cabinets. I made elaborate meals I ate alone. I called Grace too often, and she answered every time and never made me feel like a burden. Which is one of the many things I did right with that child. And then one morning, it was a Tuesday, grey sky, February cold. I woke up at 5 a.m, and instead of getting up, I just lay there. And I cried. Not the car crying, not the efficient, contained 10-minute grief that I had allowed myself. I cried the way I had not cried since Tom's funeral. Big, ugly, unmanageable crying. Crying for Tom and for the 32 years and for all the Sundays I worked instead of resting and for all the times I said I'm fine when I wasn't and for my mother who died 3 years ago and who I had also not properly grieved because there was always something that needed doing. I cried for an hour, and when it was over I felt something I had not felt in years. Empty, clean. Like a room after all the furniture has been moved and the floors have been washed and there is just space. Space for something new. Grace called that afternoon. She does that, calls at the right moment, which is either intuition or the particular attunement of a daughter who learned to track her mother's moods young. She said, "How are you today, Mom?" Really? Tom's question. She learned it from him. I said, "I cried this morning for a long time." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Good." Just that. Good. Because she understood what I understood, that the crying was not a breakdown. The crying was a beginning. I want to talk about what it means to be a woman at 60, not what the culture says it means. The culture has almost nothing useful to say about women at 60. The culture is largely still working on the premise that women become invisible after a certain age, that our value was in our youth and our fertility and our capacity to be decorative, and that what remains after those things fade is something to be managed gracefully and quietly. That is not my experience. My experience is that 60 is the first time in my life I have had enough information to make good decisions. At 20, I had energy and no wisdom. At 30, I had ambition and no perspective. At 40, I had competence and no self-knowledge. At 50, I had depth and no time. At 60, I have all of it: the experience, the perspective, the hard-won self-knowledge, the long view. I know what matters and what doesn't. I know which problems solve themselves if you leave them alone. I know the difference between a bad day and a bad life. I know who I am. I am still learning to act like it. I joined a grief support group in March. Dr. Osei suggested it. I almost didn't go. I have professional training in grief. I have sat with grieving families in the worst moments of their lives. I did not see what a support group could offer me that I didn't already know. What it offered me was this: other people. Real, present, living people, sitting in a circle on folding chairs in a church basement, telling the truth about loss. There is a woman named Patricia, 64, lost her husband 2 years ago, laughs at things that probably shouldn't be funny and is always right to. There is a man named Howard, 68, lost his wife of 40 years, brings homemade cookies every week because he learned to bake after she died and can't seem to stop. There is a younger woman, Sonia, 51, lost her mother and her marriage in the same year, who has a fierceness about her that I recognize because I used to have it and I am remembering how to have it again. We sit together every Thursday evening and we say the true things. And I think about how I spent 32 years telling patients and families that they shouldn't grieve alone, that connection was healing, that asking for help was not weakness. I think about how long it took me to take my own advice. I am learning things at 60. I am learning that the body does not lie and that listening to it is not self-indulgence, it is maintenance. I am sleeping 8 hours. I am walking every morning, not for exercise exactly, but because I like the way the world looks at 6 a.m. and I like being in it without a purpose for once. I am learning that cooking for one is not sad if you decide it isn't. I make good food now, real food, slowly, with attention. Tom would have loved it. I make it anyway. I am learning that Grace is not just my daughter, but my friend. That the relationship we have at 31 and 60 is different from and richer than the one we had at any earlier age. We talk now the way I always hoped we would, honestly, warmly, as two women who know each other. I am learning that retirement is not an ending. I volunteered at a community health clinic last month, just one afternoon a week on my own terms, with the ability to leave at a reasonable hour. I walked in and a young nurse looked up and said, "Are you the volunteer?" Oh, thank God. And I felt it again, that click of being useful, but different now, chosen, not compulsory. I am learning that grief does not finish. It changes shape. Tom is not less present in my life than he was 2 years ago. He is differently present. He lives in the chair I still call his, and in the way I take my coffee, and in the laugh I hear from Grace sometimes that is unmistakably his. Loss does not shrink. You grow around it. There is something I want to say to every woman who has spent her life taking care of everyone else. You are not a resource. You are a person. Those are different things, and the world will not always remind you of the difference. In fact, the world will frequently encourage you to forget it because your willingness to give without limit is enormously convenient for everyone around you. You are allowed to need things. You are allowed to ask for them. You are allowed to say, "I am tired, I am sad, I am struggling," without immediately following it with, "But I'm fine, I'll manage." You are allowed to let someone sit with you in the hard parts, not fix them, just sit. You are allowed to be cared for. I know how hard that is. I know the discomfort of receiving what you are so practiced at giving. I know how exposed it feels to let someone see you needing something. Do it anyway, because here is what I learned in 32 years in that ICU. Nobody gets out of this alone. We need each other, not as a sign of weakness, as a condition of being human. Let people in. Let them bring the casseroles and ask the real questions and sit with you in the grief. You have done it for others your whole life. Let them do it for you, Tom. You always wanted the true answer. So here it is, 7 years late and more honest than I could have managed any earlier. I am learning to live without you, and it is the hardest thing I have ever done, and I am doing it anyway because you would want me to, and because Grace needs me to, and because somewhere underneath all the years of being useful, I am still the woman you married on that sidewalk who had a lot to say and a lot to feel and a lot of life left. I am not fine. I am better than fine. I am present, fully, finally, all the way present in my own life. You would be so pleased. The plant in Dr. Osie's office. I asked him about it one day, what kind it was, how long he'd had it. He said, 7 years. It almost died twice. Both times I thought it was gone and it came back. I said, what did you do? He said, I stopped trying so hard. I gave it what it needed and left it alone to do what plants do. I sat with that for a long time. I am not done growing. I am 60 years old and I am not done growing. I am just learning, finally, to give myself what I need and trust that the rest will come. It's coming. I can feel it. Like the first morning of spring when you walk outside and something in the air has shifted and you think, something is waking up. Something is waking up. The sliding doors. I keep thinking about the sliding doors at St. Catherine's. The way they opened automatically. No key, no code, no permission required. You just walked toward them and they opened. I spent 32 years walking through them into the hospital. I am learning to walk toward the other doors now. The ones that open into my own life, they open the same way. You just have to walk toward them.